Now to developments out west in British Columbia. They have cancelled all tsunami advisories in the coastal regions. They were put in place last night after an 8.8 magnitude earthquake shook Russia. It triggered tsunami warnings from Hawaii to Japan. Advisories remain in effect in parts of California. Chile has upgraded its tsunami warning for most of its Pacific coast to the highest level. For more on this, we've reached John Cassidy in Victoria. He's an earthquake seismologist with Natural Resources Canada. Thanks for making time for us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So let's start with the developing news out of BC, where all tsunami advisories in the coastal regions have been cancelled. Does that mean they're in the clear?
Yes. So that means that we're in the clear. People can return to the beaches or to where they were before this all began late yesterday afternoon.
Okay, and let's talk about the powerful nature of this particular earthquake. 8.8 magnitude that triggered those tsunami warnings. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a huge earthquake. At 8.8, it ruptured a fault that was about 500 kilometers long. So it was a huge segment of fault that broke during this earthquake, movement of 6 meters or even 10 meters in some areas. And because it was beneath the ocean and it involved uplifting in some areas of the seafloor, that's what triggered the tsunami. But this is what we call a subduction earthquake. It's where an ocean plate is being pushed beneath a continent, and that takes place typically around the Pacific Ring of Fire.
You know, we've been talking about the 8.8 magnitude nature of this earthquake, and if it's confirmed, has there been any movement on that? Has it been confirmed that that's what it registered on the Richter scale?
That is the updated magnitude for this earthquake. It might change a little bit over time, but that likely is the final magnitude. So it can change. The numbers often change in the early minutes or even the first hour or two. But typically after 12 hours, 14 hours, we're getting into pretty much a final magnitude. So 8.8. This is one of the world's largest earthquakes.
And to that end, we know that before that, the strongest earthquake was in 2011, and that was a magnitude 9 earthquake, and that was in Japan, in the region of Japan. So what does that say then, if we're seeing something of that magnitude again now? What does it say about preparation and how things are shifting, perhaps?
Right. So the movements here are directly related to the movement of tectonic plates. In this part of Kamchatka, Russia, the plates are moving at about 9 centimeters each year, a little bit faster than your fingernails grow. So you can't see these movements, but over decades, over 100 years, it represents a lot of energy, a lot of movement that's being stored along these faults. So, in fact, all of the Pacific Ring of Fire from Japan, Chile, Peru, Mexico, British Columbia, Alaska, these are the most seismically active regions around the world, not only the earthquakes, but also tsunamis. And related to the subduction process, we see volcanoes, and we also see landslides in mountainous areas. So there's a lot to be aware of, and so important to know what might happen and be prepared for those events in the future.
Now, John, we've been talking a lot about BC and how the threat is sort of cleared when we're talking about the relation to that province specifically. But the earthquake also sent tsunami waves into Japan, Hawaii, and the U.S. West Coast that we were discussing there. So just how dangerous can that be?
Yeah, and every tsunami is different. So it depends so the tsunami can have larger effects further from the earthquake than in some of the closer communities in some cases. So it depends on how the energy is being focused or pushed out from the earthquake source. We often see this, what we call a directionality, where energy is being focused in a certain direction. And so if you happen to be located in that direction, whether it's South America or Hawaii or Japan, you'll see a much greater impact from the tsunami. and it also depends on the local situation, the bathymetry, and the topography of your immediate region. So it's that combination of both the earthquake source and the local situation. Which direction is your bay pointing, for example, and how quickly does the water become deep? How quickly, what's the bathymetry like in the region? So there's a lot of details that go into controlling the impacts of a tsunami, and it's relatively easy to calculate the arrival time, but getting the amplitude of the waves is much more challenging. And of course, the strong currents that often are a very large issue as well. So the currents that we see, and a tsunami is not just one wave, it's a series of waves. It continues for hours, which is why we see these advisories and watches and warnings stay in place for so long, because the first wave is not always the largest wave. It can often be the second or third wave that comes in hours later. And if you happen to be on an inlet, the water can actually slosh back and forth. And so there's another complication. So the tsunami science is really challenging, especially getting those amplitudes. But we are certainly learning a lot from past tsunamis and what's happening even today.
John, I want to thank you for your time and for your expertise on this.
You're most welcome. Thanks for the opportunity and your interest.
John Cassidy is an earthquake seismologist with Natural Resources Canada. Thank you.